There with one of the pastors of the Presbyterian church.
Hi, Peter.
And he said, he was calling this young man, and he was calling him and he wouldn't look, and he said, Sarbona. And the boy turned around and said, Pastor, why are you always calling me? And he answered back in Kosa, the clicking language. And I can't remember what he said, what was the response, but Sarbona means I see you, right? Right? And in the sense that I see you is not like I see you, but I recognize who you are. I recognize your being. This is really cool for him to do that. He immediately turned around at that point, and he acknowledged that, and he said something, I am here, right? I am here. And here's young people there are just like young people everywhere. They had the pants sagging down, he's going to a little hip-hop thing. It was kind of crazy. I just didn't expect that. But yet, the relationship, this greeting that elders would say to people, impacted the way people, how they interacted and greeted each other. And it made me think how we don't greet people or acknowledge people in here. And in my, one of the kind of backstories is that my title and role in my neighborhood is the Roving Listener, and my job is basically to see the gifts of everybody, find ways to use everyone's gift in the life of the community in ways that build community, economy, and mutual delight. Now, I had a hard time talking about that because that was something that was an innate gift of mine, that someone said, you automatically do this. So I didn't make a plan, this is we're going to do this. I was already doing it. Our church, Broadway, asked me to say, go find this. We want to support you in this. And as kind of years come, people would say, what do you do? And most of the time I would say, hang out. And that's really the truth, right? This is Dolores. Dolores lives right across the street from Broadway and been living there for how long, Dolores?
27 years.
And Dolores has a story of herself. And remember when I first moved to there, and people would say, this is a strange guy walking around with dreadlocks. He's just friendly and smiling. What is his angle? But I had realized that in our neighborhood, that people didn't ask people about gifts. They would come around with surveys and say, how can we fix these poor black folks, right? How can we fix these poor needy people? And we have the answer and you don't. Everybody knows that story here. And so I had some opposition with asking for people's gifts. I had started to realize it wasn't about just the question. It is about what I observed. When I got into people's homes, I was able to observe the gift and what people already get off the couch and do to change the life of the community. So I wasn't looking for what we can create. I'm looking for what's, say it again, what's already there. And it was a very interesting process, and I had to learn how to articulate that. And so as time went on, and some of the things I wanted to see if this works anywhere. And so what I started to do is I would go to Philadelphia, was the first place. I would just pop up in the neighborhood and say, I'm going to go roll. And I got really good at it too. Because one of the things I say never to do is cold call. But I've gotten really good at cold calling because one of the things that I didn't, well, I'll talk about that in a second. So then I went to South Africa, and people said, don't go to this neighborhood, you're going to get robbed. Don't carry a cell phone, don't do this. By the end of the second day, I was in somebody's house. By the end of the week, I was into 10 people's houses. Right? Incredible. There was another thing that kind of emerged, that I had this thing of that I would submit everything I had to people's being. I was no longer just DMI. I was whoever I was in that person's house. And I had this nervous energy. So people say, he's not a good listener. He talks fast, does this. Well, the other thing is I realized that people would be busy too as I was asking them questions. They were really listening. Now, we talked about eye contact and things like that. Those things didn't really show up until after like 3 or 4 visits. So later on, I came here and I said, I'm going to try this here at an open space. And it got really popular. John McKnight came. Second year it blew up. I had like 40 people. Scared the crap out of me. Then after that, Emory asked me to do it. Princeton asked me to do it. And it's kind of the thing, right, Dolores? That you think this is so simple, right? So, but when we go to places, people would say there's some type of fear in meeting strangers. And I had realized what I innately did was I observed first. The reason I was able to get to a stranger, somebody I never met before, because I made this observation. You know, people thought, oh, you're just this gregarious person, you can go meet anybody. But I had to take a step back. So a couple weeks ago, I was in Macon, Georgia. They have a project called the Roving Listeners. They're going to do the same thing that I kind of explained. And I said, we're going to do this thing of observation. And how the power of observation is interesting. Anybody familiar with Taiichi Ono?
Anyone?
Taiichi Ono. He's the father of Toyota.